So I started buying more modern Pokemon for openings and things, and I was just kind of thinking about, the Pokemon market, the modern market, the softer-ish prices in the vintage space, and just the more bearish market overall in this entire hobby right now, because I also just bought a one-of-one Star Wars Topps card from Topps Finest 2023. It's a super fractured, beautiful card. I bought it raw, and I bought it yesterday, and I paid a good bit of money for it, but I really felt like it was a little bit low for what it was. I'm going to talk about that card in a future video. Again, that's a Star Wars Topps card. I'm kind of waiting for it to get shipped and get to me first before I start to do that. I'm going to want to grade it and everything. I'm going to document that. But just the whole market overall is pretty bad, right? We're seeing some really negative sentiment around certain games, and I won't bring up too many names. I'll specify some things, but Pokemon is not doing super great right now. Magic is really, down in the dumps, I would say, especially with all this Universes Beyond stuff they're doing. Especially newer games right now. Just some of them are really struggling. The Kickstarter movement seems, for TCGs, it seemed to kind of faded out. And I got to tell you though, when it comes to Pokemon, especially, and I think for Magic the Gathering too, there is so much opportunity, I think, speculation, not financial advice and so on. But I really feel like this isn't the end of the hobby. And I gotta tell you, I'm gonna use an example specifically with Pokemon. Okay, vintage Pokemon cards. We had the boom 2020, 2021, right? And it feels kind of like, I agree with Rudy when he brought up this assessment that it kind of rewired our minds, and it's kind of hard to adjust to this new environment that we're in where things aren't, you can't just buy something and flip it immediately the next day or whatever, right? But I'm kind of okay with that because I've kind of settled into a mindset where I'm just kind of collecting things and enjoying some of the lower prices and really thinking about the long-term outlook. And I'm taking this philosophy and I have to recommend it to you. You have to think, if not in terms of selling this thing, but just owning it and holding it for your whole life, and not worrying about the price so much. Because, if you really love this stuff, why do you want to let it go, right? And I know there's stores and you got people who do reselling and things like that and make a business out of it. It's a fun business to have out of, and they maybe balance a little bit of selling, flipping, speculating, owning, having their own personal collection and whatnot. But I really think that even if we don't see a lot of movement on this stuff in the future, the potential, not over time, not day to day, not year to year, but the potential for one day, there's gonna be this cultural wake-up call. And I'll use Pokemon as an example. It might be for other games. You might see it with Magic. I think there's a serious problem with Magic doing the Universes Beyond that is kind of spoiling it for Magic. I'll talk a little bit about that too. But with Pokemon, 2020, 2021 is the time that a lot of people, I think, got back into it. And it's kind of like, nobody saw Pokemon getting older and older year by year, the early vintage stuff. It's like all of a sudden there was a little attention on it and there's this cultural wake-up call, right? Where suddenly everybody says, whoa, this stuff's 20 years old. A lot's happened in my life in 20 years. And I haven't been thinking about Pokemon. Now I'm back and this stuff is old and I better get on it, right? Because they're not printing Wizards of the Coast anymore, right? That stuff is, the supply's kind of out there, I think. I don't know how much sealed old stuff there is, but it's pretty expensive. And, it's just not something where you're going to see a ton of supply just suddenly come, I think. That stuff's kind of settled a little bit. And now it kind of settled back and people got into this interest that's created. People just like watching YouTube videos every day, checking TCG player market prices, checking eBay sold prices. I know because I do this, right? And it gets frustrating when you do that and you spend a lot of time and energy following these markets and not seeing upticks, or you see a lot of sideways movement, or, right now I think there's interest in just watching how bad things can get, for some games or for some sets or what have you. And it's just not getting better. And I really think, here's what you got to do. This is the mindset, the philosophy you have to have. This is the mindset I have right now. You got to pick the stuff you believe in and that is truly desirable and the market doesn't see it. And you got to buy it and hold it and love it and forget about it. Because I'll tell you where I am right now. I'm just focused on having an awesome collection and just building it and collecting. And I sell some stuff here and there. Maybe if I see like there's an interest in it, I can get a high price for it. I lost interest in it. I see this other thing. I want to do like a trade. That's something that I'll do here and there. But for the most part, you got to be thinking, is this stuff going to be, we have soft prices on vintage right now, in my opinion. And when vintage cards are not 20 years old, but they're 50 years old. Is that not going to be a wake-up call? I mean, I see, I have a 5-year-old going on 6 years old, and I go to different places, and I see other kids out in the wild playing Pokemon Go, or they bring their binder to occupational therapy, and I see they've got some Pokemon cards in there, and I go to Target, and I see what I presume to be, a mom just grabbing some blister packs and throwing them in the cart, probably to take home because her kids like Pokemon, like to open a few packs. I just really feel like there's going to be a time when a younger generation who is interested in Pokemon right now is going to grow up. And what's going to happen in all that time? You have all these advances in artificial intelligence and the digital sphere, crypto, NFTs, all this stuff, and people being on TikTok, social media. It's a very digital world, right? Are these people going to grow up having liked Pokemon? They had those physical cards of maybe some what are now modern sets. They're going to want those cards they grew up with. Are they going to start to do some research and discover Wizards of the Coast and Vintage? And probably, inflation will continue at least a little bit historically. And people will make more money. And these kids who are growing up with all these technological platforms and devices, and what do they call them, like Generation Alpha now, like because they're growing up with all this stuff and they're going to be super smart and just take over the world. I think that's the sentiment, right? And so there's going to be a lot of them, I think, who are really innovating, and the society's going to look different. And I think there's going to be a lot of interest going back once these things are not, 20 years is okay, but wait until you see these vintage cards graded and they're 50 years old, right? And who's going to have these cards? We're going to have these cards, right? And are we going to, what are we going to be, 60, 70 years old, a lot of us, in this demographic? Are we going to be willing to fire sell this stuff that we've just had our whole lives and were a huge part of our lives and we were a part of the very beginnings of it? I don't think a lot of us are going to be willing to let a lot of these cards go for very little, if ever at all. I think my collection, part of why I collect, I want to have something awesome, and one day it passes on to, my son or whoever has your stuff, when at some point in time, they're going to, I think it's kind of, a legacy. They look at this was a part of their life, right? This is something that was important to them, and look at the taste they had. Look at the things they picked and held onto and never let go because they just loved this stuff. And now this stuff is 50, 60, 100 years old, whatever, at some point. I think Rudy talks about he's made fun of calling this stuff, like museum pieces, but this is where we're heading. If Pokemon remains culturally relevant, can you imagine, it's a card, you think about Babe Ruth card from 1914, that's a little bit over 100 years old, right? And one day Pokemon cards, vintage cards, will be over 100 years old. You don't think there's going to be some kind of premium on that, even if we're not seeing it? The problem is we're watching it day to day, right? And it just flatlines or goes down, and there's not a lot of liquidity. But there are moments, I think, in collectibles, and I think this happened with the 2020, 2021 boom. I understand there was the pandemic. But it's like suddenly there's a cultural wake-up call. Someone talks about it on TikTok. Logan Paul talked about Pokemon, or on some platform, and says, hello, do you realize this stuff is 50 years old? Are you looking at these pop reports? Are you seeing how things have, supply has not increased over the years, and how people are still into Pokemon, and how old these cards and how hard it is to get them, and how a few of people who are willing to sell, how expensive those cards are now? It's time to wake up and chase this stuff before it's gone and put in a museum somewhere. Now, I don't know if it's quite going to be that good, and I have to say, look, I'm not a financial advisor. This is pure speculation, and I have to tell you, my net worth is in stocks and real estate mostly. I'm not investing in Pokemon cards or any collectible as a retirement. This is a passion for me. But I think prices do reflect desirability. And I think a lot of collectibles will be desired for people's collections, not as a retirement play or something. Or I don't really completely agree with this whole financial aspect. I think the money market reflects desirability. And I think people do want to see higher prices. I don't think you should see it as a retirement account. I think you should see it as a luxury item you're willing to put some small percentage of your net worth into. And even if they're nicer, higher priced items, so that you can just, it's just something you can enjoy and display and think about and collect and organize or whatever, however you want to engage with it. And I just think, Maybe we don't see it when they're 30 years old, maybe not 40, but there's gonna be a day like when they're 50 years old or something where suddenly there's this wake up call, And this stuff is gonna have a future. You go out in the wild. I taught middle school for a little bit. I hear kids talking about Pokemon. Pokemon's not going away. I think younger generations are gonna continue to desire it. And maybe modern sets, you got a hot Charizard right now that gets overshadowed by the next 5 Charizards to come after. You have to be careful with modern sets because there's going to be such a saturation. You can imagine how many sets of Pokemon are going to have come out after 50, 30 more years, right? Some of that stuff's going to get lost. It's going to fall through the cracks and lose interest. But vintage is such an easy step. I think everybody who gets into Pokemon at some point is going to realize, like one of their very first steps, right? It's going to be vintage. Oh, well, what's the earliest stuff, right? Oh, we have this Wizards of the Coast period. Boom, there are your sets. And so I think there's always going to be some fundamentals to those cards, and they're beautiful cards. These kids, they're growing up with TikTok and NFTs, digital stuff. People pay all this money for skins. I saw in Mortal Kombat 1, you got like a Halloween fatality that was super expensive for what it was, right? And then one day the game, servers will shut down or something, systems won't be backwards compatible, and people pay money for this digital stuff that just disappears one day. And there's going to be a point when people look at these physical cards, right? They're 50 years old or however old, and they're like, this is not just like some kind of digital thing that just disappears when the server shut down. Like, this is a thing that has existed through time. In some cases before you were born, right? From another period of history that existed, but that you can't go back to, but it is a remnant of that, right? And people are going to realize that. I think they're going to value that more because it's going to be a society that is leaving physical things behind more and more in some aspects. So there's going to be more romanticism out there. It's already developing now, right? That's why we go after this old stuff. We see it now. But I think it's going to take some time for some people to grow up. And here's the hard, and to realize this as the next generation, right? To kind of push this thing up at some point, we need this wake-up call moment. But I've got to tell you the hard pill to swallow in all of this, right? I'm extremely bullish in the long term. But here's the thing. Again, I'm talking 30, 40 years ago. I think we need a generation, maybe 2, to grow up and realize this, right? But the generation now, this 25, I think, to 45-year-old, people who are really pushing this market and really going after this stuff and making it a thing, we're going to be, 60, 70, 80, whatever, depending on where you are? Are we really going to be thinking about this stuff, the future of this stuff quite as much for us personally? And that's the tough pill to swallow because that it gets down to this, right? This is not a money-making opportunity for you right now. If you're a seller, and you're selling modern stuff, and you're getting distributor pricing and all this, I understand. I want you to succeed. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your average collector who maybe doesn't do this full time. And you have to think, you can't be buying this stuff and thinking it's going to boom next year. You're picking one card and it's going to 10x next year or two and you're going to have made a big profit. You can make those plays. You can gamble. It's kind of fun sometimes if, you can get some, if you can analyze it in a certain way and you think that's going to happen, you want to see if your play works out. But I think that truly you just have to love this stuff and want to build a collection that reflects a taste that can be appreciated. And then, you pass your collection down at some point, you built something and someone looks at it and says, these are beautiful, amazing relics from a past time in a hobby that continues to be successful and popular. And it's amazing what they built and, that they have now, passed this down to me or, and this was a part of their life. And hopefully it's not the entire part of their life, right? They did other things, but at least in some small way, it was a pastime hobby that they spent some time on and they cared about. And they built something beautiful, what they decided to go after, what their tastes were, what they decided on. And the price is something that reflects just the desirability and the sort of work of art of some of these things as old items that have amazing art that were a part of something really beautiful and a part of a certain generation's upbringing and that they cared a lot about and gave them some amount of fulfillment, in combination with other things in their lives. And I think that's what it's all about. So I think the play right now is, you know, if you're not, as long as you're not a, you know, full-time reseller or you know, card store or something, it's a different conversation. I'm really talking again about just kind of your average collectors, and if you've gotten kind of spoiled, like I did to a certain extent with some items over that big boom we just recently had, I think it's time to just kind of slow down and, you know, and try to be reasonable about what you're buying, get it at good prices, but realize that it's something that, you know, hopefully it's something truly special that will stand the test of time, that you just enjoy, and that it's just a part of your collecting passion, your hobby, and you're just enjoying it. And who knows what the future truly brings for this stuff, but you know, you're being reasonable about it. You know, you're not going into debt to go after this. Some of this stuff is just a part of your hobby, something you enjoy, and something that when you look back on it in your life, are you happy with those things you went after? You truly enjoy them, right? Are those things you will continue to go after as long as you can? And so that is why I'm so bullish on Pokemon and a lot of just, you know, truly great collectibles that will stand the test of time. I'm not going to talk about Magic. I'm not going to talk about comics. I collect a lot of other things. I believe in sealed video games. Talk about them in another video. I want to hear what you think about the long-term future of Pokemon and especially vintage items. What do y'all think about vintage cards? Do you think they have such potential in the long term like I do? Tell me down in the comments below. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, you want to see more videos like this, hit the like button. It means so much, helps the video so much. And I think a lot of people, they watch it and they forget to do that, but you got to do that. Make sure you hit that like button. And I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.